no stone left unturned. If I have to describe every teacher's journey in 2020, I would describe it in one single sentence. We left no stone unturned. Starting from preparing a lesson to delivering the lesson in the class, we went through every possible website for finding the proper material, the proper technique, the proper worksheet, something that would turn the inclusion of technology into a successful integration. While 2020 was a time of trial for all of us, in 2021, we renewed ourselves as teachers and started a new journey. How was this journey for me? Would you like to hear about my journey? While I was looking into my 2020 journey, the thing that I mainly focused on was my technology, including technology in a proper way in my teaching. And that was a transition, right? I mean, everyone called it a transition. In 2020, we transitioned from physical in-person classes to online classes. We went into the technology. We started using all the devices, apps, everything, anything actually that made sense to us. If 2020 was all about connecting with the inner techies of ourselves, what about 2021? For me, 2021 came as a transformation. In 2020, the transition was from in-person to online teaching. And in 2021, the transformation was there from technology to humanology. What is this humanology? Hello, my name is Rezwana Islam. I have been working as a lecturer in the Center for Language Studies at the University of Liberal Arts, Bangladesh. And this is my Humanology 2021. And yes, it's a transformation from tool to the teacher self. Let's look into it. When I was teaching in 2020, there were some smashing success in terms of developing different materials, choosing the suitable content, preparing the lesson in such a way that even if my students got disconnected, they could reconnect and understand the rest of the lesson. And all of us, we know about that alternative assessment, right? I mean, very soon, the regular examination can be very well a thing of the past. And alternative assessment, like making portfolio, describing yourself in a video, this sort of thing could be the new way of evaluating our learners, right? Well, even I did that as well. At the same time, the gamified learning was in the horizon. To make the class more interesting, I tried to explore different websites, different softwares, something that I can use for both the cell phone users and the laptop users and the desktop users, and everybody can use these softwares to play different games and learn something in the process. I'm sure you have one or two websites right now open on your desktop where you are looking at those games. I did the same thing. While I was going through a lot of changes, trainings, learnings, and success, somehow I noticed something very shocking. There was this race for getting good grades, and that made me realize, are my students more focused on getting a good grade as a part of their language learning? Are they focusing on their passion for language learning? Are they truly passionate about the learning process anymore? Or have I turned this class into a place where you are going to focus on only getting the good grades and good marks? Was there a certain exhaustion in the entire process? That got me thinking. No matter how many tools and techniques I use, should I focus more on the presence, on the human, on the people? Should I focus more on my students? Should I focus more on myself? Then I stumbled into this framework. I was actually looking into available theories and frameworks where I would get my answer, where I could explore my teacher self as well as my student self. And that took me to Community of Inquiry Framework by Garrison, Anderson, and Archer. And this framework made me think, If we are talking about a successful classroom environment, shouldn't we think about our students and ourselves at the same time? I can see the students all over this inquiry framework. Where am I then? Am I only in the teaching presence section? I don't think so. I also believe that the social presence and the cognitive presence has something to do with the teacher's role in the class, right? To know more about this, I started looking into the categories and the codes. When I started looking into the categories, no matter which category I looked into, no matter which examples I looked at, I could only understand one thing. As a teacher, I had to do something different. I had to do something more. I was only thinking about how I was delivering my lesson and how I was conducting my class. Right now, I have to think about how I am connecting with my student in terms of getting into some sort of research. My students need my instructions. If we are talking about a risk-free environment in the class where they could share their ideas with the teacher as well as with their peers, they need some checklist, some sort of instruction about how to behave or how to communicate with each other in a formal environment, right? So that got me into this community of inquiry framework. And this community of inquiry framework inspired me to analyze my presence in the class. The way I was doing things, I started to analyze them more, and I integrated some of the new ideas. And my students, I also looked at their response. So in terms of the social presence for every teacher, the social presence comes with the biggest challenge, keeping them engaged in the class. So as a part of my social presence, I tried to do something where my learner would feel comfortable. We started with the netiquettes, of course, in the beginning of the semester. For their orientation, they had to learn about the netiquettes of online teaching and learning. So how they're going to talk to the faculty members, how they're going to talk to their classmates, how they're going to respond to their classmates. All of these things were discussed in detail. Learners needed to know that when they're talking to each other, sometimes a funny emojicon can create a lot of misunderstanding. So they had to be aware about that. I also started some group discussion. I've noticed one thing, that when I was doing this consultation, when I was doing a consultation during my office hour, only the developed learners, the learners who were really interested in the class as well, who actually opened up in the class as well, they participated in this group discussion during the consultation time. At least in one-on-one consultation, I could only get the more confident learners. What about those learners who are a bit introvert? Then I requested them to come in as a small group of 3 or 4 people. And within this small group of 3 or 4 people, they would come and discuss one common problem, and I would talk to them about it. And I got a very good response. Addressing learners individually, now this was comparatively easier since I can see all those little names in the screen. And at the same time, I could create a new bond with them by calling them out individually, and they felt a kind of obligation, but not in a negative way. They felt that obligation that they have to respond to me, and they can actually respond. They had that confidence, they got that confidence. Structured peer review with checklist. One thing in my class that I tried to maintain was a small form of peer review. So even if a student explained something in one single sentence, a peer had something to say about it. But I made sure that they are not bullying each other, or I made sure that there is no conversation of anything which doesn't actually connect to this entire discussion. So I told my students that you have to follow the following points. For example, you cannot say good or bad when you look at someone's presentation. You cannot just talk about something you didn't like. You have to explain the reason for calling something good or calling something bad, or saying that this idea needs improvement. When it came to forum discussion, I realized that my learners were not connecting with each other by themselves. So I turned the forum discussion into a role play where students had to play different roles. For example, one student would play the role of a disgruntled customer, and another student would play the shop owner role, and they would reply to one another based on their experience. So if the customer had any problem with a particular product that he bought from that particular online shop, the shop owner would reply to him or her. And that role play got the forum discussion or turned the forum discussion into a very interesting point, or an interesting, what should I say, an interesting role. And if I think about my cognitive presence, I started thinking about using the local context while I introduce a topic. Now you have to remember that most of my learners, they're living with their parents or their family members in their hometown. So using the formal context wouldn't get a very good result out of it. So I mostly use a local context based on their background, based on the situation they're going through right now. I tried to focus on, and I tried to focus on the things that they could go through. And based on that, I prepared the lesson. I had to identify the new language needs. Let's face it, we are turning into a closed global community because of this pandemic. We are learning about the same thing. We are learning about the same sort of precaution when it even comes to a certain disease or a vaccine. So the language needs, we had to think about them one more time. Ensuring peer involvement for connecting ideas and turning the Google search into an organizing search. While I tried to help my students to do their own searching, I turned it into a very organized process. So when my student would search a topic, they would take some idea from online and they would share it in the chat section of the online class. And after that, their peers or the other classmates would check out that chat section and choose the better ideas, the good ones that they think is relevant to the class. I tried to connect the classroom task with the real world. In case of, if there was some sort of writing, I told my students that if you're writing a thesis statement or a topic sentence, make sure that you are learning it properly, because in future, when you are writing maybe an SOP or you are writing a blog article, you're going to have to use the same techniques. In case of the teaching presence, I thought about my students first and then myself. So I tried to identify their contribution in the class, even if my students respond with a emoticon, a simple emoticon to a lesson, I tried to identify that as well. And I tried to acknowledge that in every possible way. So students actually started participating more. Personalization. Now, while 10 new videos couldn't do anything good, one story from my personal life about my educational experience or about my journey got them into the class. And as a result of it, students actually started opening up about themselves, and they started talking about the peer friendly environment that they were facing in the class, because the more they started talking about their life, the more their classmates opened up as well. And nobody was judging each other anymore because everybody was sharing something about their life, right? I tried to bring a variety in the feedback, because the feedback I was giving before was mainly written feedback. This time I tried some oral feedback as well. And in some cases, I didn't give direct corrective feedback. Rather, I shared some indirect feedback in the form of a question, in the form of a small expression. And I tried to make them think. One problem that I kept facing was that my students would forget the lesson that they did maybe 2 classes back. So after 1 or 2 lessons, I tried to revisit the previous topics, and I tried to get the learner into the idea that they have to review the previous lesson if they want to go on with the current lesson, because everything is connected together. All these things created an amazing environment in the class. The first change that I noticed was the goal-oriented language learning. While the learners previously thought about their grades, now they were thinking about their performance. And they were also very conscious about how this performance will affect their future. Some of them came and talked to me about their future plan, their future job, and maybe they were applying somewhere right now, because I teach mostly undergraduate students, and they actually start thinking about their career from the very beginning of their university life. So maybe they were applying somewhere, they're applying abroad, and they were trying to write an email, or they're trying to fill up a form. They started talking about how the language will help them there. And they also started thinking about the fact that this is the beginning of their university life. If they cannot improve themselves right now, what are they going to do later? They also started connecting with peers. So in the beginning, I have to be honest, in the beginning, I had to push them a bit, but by the middle of the semester, I could see that students, they were tagging each other in the online platform and they were talking to each other. They were pushing each other a little bit to finish the task in the forum discussion, to do the role play. So all of these things were in action. The spontaneous participation, now this thing was the most invaluable experience for me, where students shared their emotion with different emoticons or wrote something in the chat section while I was teaching. And the lectures were never the lectures anymore. I was able to change their point of view, and I was able to make them see the true value of language learning instead of the true value of grades. So this is how my journey was conducted. In 2021, from tools to teacher, I started to focus on the human side of it. And the human side of it turned me into a more humane teacher. That's all from my presentation. Thank you very much. These are the references. I'd like to hear about your experience in 2021 journey. If you have something to share, if you want to talk about how you engaged your learners, please share that in the comment section. Thank you very much.